It's the Painexam Podcast with your host, David Rosenblum, MD. If you treat pain or have an interest in pain management, join us as we discuss painful disorders, alternative treatments, practice management, and more. Be sure to subscribe to the Painexam newsletter at painexam.com and review the podcast on Stitcher or iTunes. Our high-yield premium episodes are now available on the Painexam app with a premium subscription or access for free with a CME subscription at painexam.com. And now, without further ado, here's your host, Dr. Rosenblum.
Welcome back to the Painexam Podcast. If you're following me on the YouTube channel or the website or my newsletter, you know we have a lot going on, lots of big meetings coming up, ACIP, Aspen, and the state societies. So if you happen to be coming to any of these events, come stop by the Painexam table, say hi. And this episode is actually very unique in the sense that I don't really have a political platform, and I've never really been involved in policy making or helping to alter policy. But I was approached by Mark Stultz and Chris Conrad of Sprint, SPR Therapeutics, and they brought some things to my attention, which I kind of knew, but I didn't really know. And it had to do with an entity called IROs, and that's an independent review organization. And basically, when there's an appeal initiated by the physician's office and it gets denied, the patient can then start an appeal process. And then if that gets denied, there's an independent review organization that is supposed to look at the appeal and give an independent review of what's going on. Unfortunately, that is not exactly the case. There's a little bit of there's an issue, not a little bit, there's a big issue with this conflict of interest. And, you know, I'm going to let Mark, who initiated this, and Chris talk about that, and welcome to the show. And just a note, this is not an SPR Therapeutics promotion or anything like that. This is just something that came to our attention and is bigger than SPR Therapeutics. It's bigger than pain management. This affects all medical specialties. So, you know, us physicians on our own, we're not the best at lobbying for ourselves and getting political and changing policy. Sometimes we need a little guidance and to see the bigger picture. And that's where Mark and Chris come in. Mark, welcome to the show, Chris. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Dr. Rosenblum. Appreciate being here. Yeah, I think great point. We're in a unique position as a company that is investing a lot in trying to improve the prior authorization process. And as a result of that, we have a large team of people that do nothing but support prior authorizations and appeal denials all day long. It's a team of about over 20. And as a result of that, we've learned that this extra process exists for patients when a patient-based denial is utilized, which is a different process, a more extensive process than what you have as physicians. Essentially, as physicians, you are, your end game is the peer-to-peer meeting, and we all know how those typically go. When the patient exerts their rights under the ACA, they can actually take it to the next level. Of course, most patients don't know that, and we've learned that over time. But what we're able to do with our data is really allow that to serve as a proxy that we could carry forward and demonstrate how often the independent reviews are not either seemingly independent or just inadequate. And when you look at the requirements under the ACA for IRO review, there's no really requirements around the quality of the review. And the only way these independent review organizations are evaluated is on the timeliness of their review. And while it is supposed to be, at least in my mind, the type of review that would be done as if you were looking for the best thing for a loved one, we don't see that level of review. I just saw a review this week that came through where the denial was overturned, and it was an incredibly well done, very thorough review, refuting the notion that these technologies are experimental and investigational, and really well done. And I'm probably going to be posting that here on LinkedIn shortly. But what we see all too often is we were preparing to go to DC and organize with you and Dr. Kalia and others, is that these reviews were just incredibly poorly done. Where our technology is PNS, we saw TENS literature quoted, for example. And what we see all too often is that the IRO physician's denial is based on the payer's coverage policy language, wherein if it says this is not a covered benefit, that's as far as the independent reviewer physician takes it, rather than looking at best evidence and looking at medical necessity. What has this patient failed thus far? They're really not doing an independent review as you would, as I would say for a loved one. Does this pass muster? Is this a reasonable treatment? And it feels like these reviews are really kind of almost done under the auspices of coverage policy versus a one-off independent review of, does this technology make sense for this patient? And to your point, Dr. Rosenblum, this expands way beyond pain management, way beyond our technology, and that's what we really wanted to shine a light on as we went forward with DC, with you and the others, and with the patients that we're able to bring to the table as well. So that's kind of that's what brought us to this point.
Thank you, Mark. I also, Chris, before you go, I wanted to also welcome Hemant Kalia. Hemant, can you just give a little introduction as to who you are and how you're involved?
Yeah, thanks, David. I'm Hemant Kalia. I'm one of the interventional pain physicians. I practice in upstate New York, and I'm the current president of the Monroe County Medical Society, and I also am the vice president for the reimbursement and regulatory affairs for ASPN. I'm also highly involved at the state level through our NYSIP on advocacy and policy efforts, because these are two different beasts. There are federal regulations, and then the states have some oversight on specific policy development and implementation as well. So from an advocacy and policy standpoint, it's really important to be involved both at the national level and at the state level.
Got it. And Chris, you were you're the one who probably approached me first with this whole thing. And do you mind just giving us a little bit of your involvement in this whole process?
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Rosenblum. My name is Chris Conrad. I'm the Senior Director of Payer Relations at SPR Therapeutics. And, I've been with SPR for almost coming up on a year. And I think what's important to note is that, Mark talks about medical devices, and Dr. Rosenblum, you talked about your experience, which I think you're going to talk a little bit about IROs. The overview or the oversight of IROs stems across medical technologies. It's into drug, it's into other things. And I've recently learned about oncology practices being kind of taken aback by their involvement with oncology patients. And so this broader picture, or the bigger picture, as we look at it, is really about, did you know? And did you know the involvement? And did you know you had options? And did you know how it's supposed to be done? Just to go back a little bit, way back when I first got into the business, I used to work for a major payer and was privy to being part of review processes that included case managers and medical directors. And we're going back a little bit, right? And I had no idea what really was happening. Just, we need you to be a part of this and watch what's happening. And it always caught me, off guard, because no matter what the case manager or the nurses had to present to the medical directors inside the payer, that made great sense. That was basically physicians who treated the patient, who said, this is what they need. Case managers agreed with it. The medical directors at that payer, oftentimes, if not all the time, overturned it at the table and said, nah, try this. Go back and do this again. And not to sell the age, but that same process is now still very apparent, but under the guise of something else, right? Once it exceeds a internal review, a peer-to-peer review. We take it through these stages of appeals and get to the IRO. And it's sad that it seems to me, from an outsider looking in, is just another form of delaying opportunity to get the patient the coverage they need for the individual patient, not the masses, but for those who individually, as Mark stated, have a unique situation that needs a unique review. And so, perspective, right, of they may change the letters and change the names, but it's still the same process.
Let's talk about IROs. So you guys want to shed some light on how they're regulated and how they're structured?
Sure, I can take a crack at that. They were initially set up under the ACA, and they are governed, I guess, by an organization called URAC. URAC provides the standards by which they must comply, and the things they are required to do really is just report on the fact that they've closed out the independent review after a certain time period. I think that time period in which they have to have the review done is 45 days. And that's really it. There's no review of quality. There's no review of what kind of time did the physician reviewer take to review this case. What we saw when we were preparing to go to DC really is what opened our eyes. We saw the top 5 or 6 independent review organizations overturning 0% of cases, and these are cases that are prescribed by people like those listening to the call. These are highly regarded, highly trained physicians who have exhausted other treatments. We're really pleased with the fact of how we see our technology being utilized, where physicians are really shepherding it carefully. They're not overutilizing it. They're really identifying patients well. And we saw these very egregious cases where patients who were really worthy were being denied. But when you see the number of times in which they're not overturning cases that have been prescribed, and there's really no vehicle to hold them accountable, you can submit a complaint to URAC, but we haven't seen any action on that. We've worked very closely with
the group that regulates all these IROs.
Pardon me?
I'm just clarifying. URAC is the group that oversees the IROs.
I just want to quickly chime in and clarify a few things. So URAC does not regulate anybody. They only provide very loose standards for which there is no accountability, and it's really hard to ascertain the standards of the review which these IROs are providing. And that's where the loophole is. I think it's a crisis in making because of lack of oversight and lack of specific standards which these independent reviews should be held against. I think this is a new bubble in the making, which we really need to be ahead of the game and bring this issue to the attention before it reaches a point where we're trying to address that issue once it has kind of already left the game.
Yeah, to Dr. Kalia's point, URAC is only a credentialing organization. That's as far as they take it. There really is no oversight, and that was part of our appeal on Capitol Hill. This is an area that desperately needs oversight. What we were seeing when we were reviewing charts is really mere rubber stamps on case after case after case, where the same old or irrelevant literature was cited in very different cases. And that's not what this is really intended to be.
I think, like I mentioned, Capitol Hill. Years ago, I was approached by a company to do consulting work, and they asked me to review some charts and give my opinion. And of course, anytime I approved something, it was against their policy, and they lost interest in me. And it's just they just utilized the physician's name to say no. In fact, yesterday, I had to do a peer-to-peer on a patient with occipital neuralgia. Patients had multiple occipital shots, and I'm going to name names. Optum, the physician working for Optum, it was a pain management, board-certified pain management physician, basically flat out said, the policy is unless they have pain related to a malignancy or surgery in the region of the occipital nerve, we will not approve it. There's evidence for this. It's been around for 50, 60, I don't know how many years. Standard of care. So I think this whole process of just saying no in this fashion is a real big problem. And I think what physicians also need to realize is there is something we could do about it. And the whole lobbying experience that you guys introduced me to was kind of eye-opening. And I think actually after I posted that LinkedIn post about what we did, a physician from Ohio, I believe, he was interested in lobbying, and he wanted more information on the lobbying group that we used, because him and his group are going through difficulties in which the state's telling them no opiates, but they also don't want them doing procedures. And when you prescribe opiates to treat unrelenting pain, you're doing the wrong thing. So they were trying to regulate that policy. But I guess Chris, Mark, maybe, or Hemant, the whole process with lobbying and getting everything together and going through that route, can you guys just describe it a little bit for everyone?
I can give a quick overview of what the process kind of looks like and where physicians' voices can be really impactful. So there are two aspects of the advocacy and policy reform. One is through the legislative pathways, and the second is through the regulatory pathways. Those are two major broad areas where physician voices or unified voices can come together and make a meaningful change, which will affect at the population level and slowly trickle down to the individual level. So when I talk about legislative channel, that requires going through either at the state level or at the federal level through the state and the House and your respective state legislative arms. When it comes to the regulatory pathways, there are options there as well. So, for example, you can directly work with the CMS, which is the biggest insurer in the country. And CMS has specific regions in the country which are overseen by what we call MACs, which is your Medicare administrative contractors. So wherever you are practicing, I would encourage you to look at which MAC is overseeing your Medicare administration policies. So CMS comes up with what is known as NCD, which is National Coverage Determinant, which supersedes every policy. If there is no NCD, then the regional MACs will come up with what is known as LCD, Local Coverage Determinant. You have an opportunity as a unified voice through your specialty society or through your medical society to work directly with your MACs or go directly to CMS and work towards having policy reform for the evidence-based treatments which are coming in our field of international pain management. When it comes to commercials, it's a different ball game because they have their individual medical directors and the policy evaluation groups, and you have to go through their reps to set up those meetings at either the regional level or at the state level. The regulatory reform, which I talked about, is more once CMS makes a change in their policy, that becomes a regulation which most of the commercials will technically have to follow because Medicare is the biggest insurer in our country. There is also an opportunity to work at the state level when the budgets are being approved by the governor. So if some specific ask doesn't go through the legislative process at the state level, then you can work with your core group, your specialist societies, to have that included in the budget so that there is a money carved out for that specific initiative if you're trying to roll that out at a population level. So broadly, these are two channels where you can get involved with advocacy and policy reform.
And I'll just complement that a little bit with you bring up some good points about Medicare process versus commercial. I guess what I would disagree with, as we see, is while there is an NCD for PNS, for example, for Medicare, the commercial payers aren't following, and that's not moving the needle at all, unfortunately. But you bring up some really good points, and something I'd like to echo, or maybe exaggerate a little bit further, is we as industry can pull some of these things together. And Chris did an excellent job pulling all the physicians together. Another colleague on the team, Cecelia Ruble, did a really nice job pulling in patients to tell their story. So that's a role that industry can play, is coordinating. But insurance companies don't want to hear from industry. They want to hear from you as physicians. And so, the types of things that you can do to help are advocacy letters on administrative letterhead, especially if you're in an academic center. That's really important. And then societies getting involved to fight these issues as well. We just saw an issue with Humana Medicare Advantage, who wrote a non-coverage policy for PNS, and I was really pleased to see that NANS took point on that and brought in 10 additional societies to appeal that. That is really the way forward. And so industry can be a catalyst, but as physicians, you really need to own this, write advocacy letters, work with your local politicians. They generally have healthcare staffers that you can reach out to. You probably won't speak to your congressman or your senator directly, but they'll have a healthcare staffer whose job it is to listen to you. So back to you, Dr. Rosenblum.
That's great. I think a few things. Physicians need to take that and realize that they can make a difference. And additionally, as we discussed in DC, we really have an uphill battle. The vertical integration of healthcare with the insurance companies. They tell you not to prescribe opiates, but then they won't approve opiate-sparing therapies. I think, unfortunately, pain management, we're a little fragmented with our societies. We have a lot of societies, probably more than other specialties. I wish there was a way for us to unite them, just for at least the political aspects, because if we could just unite the political aspect, I mean, they can still have their individual meetings and all that, but I think we would be more powerful and make a bigger impact. I did feel that the staff of the congressman were quite receptive. I think it was a very smart thing that you guys did by bringing in two patients. One of them who was denied but then received your therapy, and then the other one who is in need of your therapy but was denied. And it shed some light. It put a face on the issue for the congressional staff. And before we wrap it up, would you mind just telling us the next steps or where we left off with at the Capitol?
Sure. Next steps, we're working with our lobbyist group, Farragut Partners, who's done just an exceptional job pulling these together. At this point, they want to pull together a congressional letter that would then move forward probably to OIG to bring this to their attention, recognizing that this is an area that needs a lot of oversight. And just like many physicians aren't aware of this until we bring it to their attention, members of Congress are clearly not aware of this. They are looking at things like the prior authorization process that they'd put a lot of effort into. And the thing that we hear over and over again from them is this is whack-a-mole. This is deal with one issue and then something else pops up. As Chris mentioned earlier, a policy going from experimental investigational to not medically necessary really doesn't move the needle. But that will likely be the next step in the process. And I'd like to recognize another industry partner we've been working with very closely. Chip Mobus at Mainstay Medical has been here on the journey with us and leading as well. And so this isn't just SPR. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of people in the industry who are pursuing this, but I do want to tip my hat to Chip for the partnership that we've had with them as well. So there's some collaboration going on in industry to try and raise awareness here.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you guys for joining us and for opening my eyes, because there's a lot of this I just did not realize was going on in my day-to-day. Of course, I see the denials on the peer-to-peers, but this is a whole nother level. And showing us that we can do something about it. So that's great. Any closing remarks, guys?
Yeah, let me just say this. I think echoing Dr. Kalia's comments, you need to be active, right? Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many things pulling about your day, but this is, if you don't know what's happening, it's probably happening, right? And in your area at least. So get active. Get in touch with Dr. Rosenblum, Dr. Kalia, your local legislature. Find a way to get to someone who can help kind of pull this together for you, because I think the more awareness we've drawn to this with other physicians and other specialties, not just within where we are, it will move the needle quite a bit, and more significantly than maybe with just one group.
Thanks,
Yeah, I would just finally say, advocacy starts at the grassroots. So definitely get involved with your national societies, but start getting involved at the county level, your county medical societies, your state pain societies, your specialty societies, and then it's a top-down and a bottom-up approach, which really will make the needle move and preserve our field of interventional pain management, where we are able to offer evidence-based therapies to our patients.
Excellent points. I'll make final comment, which is just echoing what Dr. Kalia said. The other option you have as physicians is to raise issues of, let's call it egregious behavior by payers or IROs to your state Department of Insurance. That's what they're there to do. In some states, the IROs are overseen by the Department of Insurance. In other states, they're federally regulated through an organization called Desai. And so I just encourage everybody to be active. If we can help, I'm happy to make any introductions that we can possibly. And then the last comment finally is, we really don't have time to talk about it, but there's a similar process to carry forward on the Medicare side, which is to take these through to an administrative law judge hearing, which serves the same purpose as an IRO. But if you're having problems with a Medicare Advantage plan, you have options there too to appeal the decisions that they're making. So just wanted to put that on the table as food for thought.
That's great. That's great. Knowledge is power. And going to wrap it up. Thanks for joining me. Go to nrappain.org for board prep to check out our meetings, as well as follow us on social media. I'm going to post this on YouTube as well as my other social media channels, and hand it off to everyone else on this call as well to do the same. Thanks again, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rosenblum.
Take care.
Dr. Rosenblum is here solely to educate, and you are solely responsible for all your decisions and actions in response to any information contained herein. These podcasts are not intended as a substitute for the medical advice of a physician to a particular patient or specific ailment. You should regularly consult a physician in matters relating to yours or another's health. You understand that this podcast is not intended as a substitute for consultation with a licensed medical professional. Copyright 2017, David Rosenblum, all rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, electronic, mechanical, recording, or otherwise, without the prior written permission of the author.